Welcome to the Blue Suede Lounge, everybody. We're your happy hosts. I'm Dan.
I'm TL.
You know, baby, the year was 1956. The popular artist of that day was Dean Martin,
Right.
Ella Fitzgerald, Frank Sinatra, and Perry Como had just put out his brand new hit song, Hot Diggity Dog Diggity. The big film was The Ten Commandments, and the big TV shows was Highway Patrol, The Cisco Kid, Gunsmoke, and The Adventures of Superman. But the world was about to be exposed to
Right.
something brand new, something scary, something
Exact-
wild, something very different.
Yes, actually, when Elvis hit his TV debut with the Dorsey's Brothers stage show, I guess they did think he was kind of scary, didn't they?
Yeah, well, a lot of people did. They didn't know what to expect. Those who had heard of him, well, they finally got to see what all the hype was about.
Right. January 28, 1956, that was his television debut date. He appeared 6 different times on the Tommy Dorsey Brothers show. And, you know, we recently did a show just last week covering this. And we felt like it was a good idea to come on here and talk a little bit more in depth about Elvis's start. Because what I find interesting is most people think Ed Sullivan had something to do.
It's the first thing people think when we talk about Elvis
Right.
50s TV, Ed Sullivan. Yeah.
Yes, when Elvis made his appearance on Ed Sullivan. Actually, no.
No,
Really, honestly, I think the Dorsey brothers, they just don't get enough credit.
they don't. Not
Yeah.
at all.
They're an amazing group of guys anyway, big band era, but very talented men with an eye for new talent.
Yes.
And in 56, there were so many shows that were headlining there in New York. There was
The Big Four.
Yeah, the Big Four. There was Tommy Dorsey. There was Ed Sullivan. There was
Uncle Milty.
Uncle Milty was out there. Steve Allen.
Yeah.
They were all out there, and they were all fighting for ratings. And in that early few months of that year, ratings were down. I believe that Sullivan was leading the group, but
Yeah.
the ratings were all down. It's like people were getting bored.
Everybody wanted to beat Ed. They wanted to catch up
They
to
were
Ed.
trying to beat Ed. So the Dorseys sent out their band manager. His name was Tino Barzi, I believe. And they sent him out and said, you know, find us someone. And he happened to go to the Louisiana Hayride and saw Elvis live.
I think they were filming
In
the hayride.
Shreveport.
They were doing like a movie short on the Louisiana hayride at the time.
Yeah, and he came back and said, I've got the guy for you.
Yeah.
When the Dorseys heard of him and was able to see the clip, they were like, yeah, let's get him. Let's put him on. It just exploded.
Right.
They ended up kicking Sullivan right off the top ratings.
Yeah.
Now, what's funny is when Sullivan saw them airing Elvis for the first time, he was like, I ain't going to have anything to do with that. And then all of a sudden the ratings come in and he's basically getting beat by
Right.
Elvis.
Yeah.
So it was kind of funny. And as Elvis started to become more popular, he went from the Dorsey Brothers. He did 6 shows there. And then from the Dorsey Brothers stage show, Elvis went over to Milton. And Milton loved him.
Yeah, Milton allowed him to be himself. And he let Elvis show his sense of humor. And Elvis got a little bit of acting in there, you know, doing some skits with him and things like that. But there was a great, I don't know what, a kinship between the two. Milton Berle recognized Elvis. He let him be Elvis. He didn't try to censor him in any way. Not that the Dorsey brothers did. But I think by the time Elvis did get to Milton Berle, he'd gotten comfortable in front of the cameras.
Right.
Because you can see a difference. If you watch the Dorseys, you see the evolution on those 6 appearances.
Right.
And the final appearance, he does Heartbreak Hotel, and he's already got a big hit. So by the time he does get to Milton Berle, well, he's used to those cameras being on him. He's used to being himself a little bit. So he really does be
Right.
Elvis there.
Let's just take a little sneak peek and listen in on a little skit on the Milton Berle show and see how they interact with each other.
Okay, now, how can I get these girls to scream over me this way? I really mean that. How can I do that?
Mr. Burrow, I don't think you like it.
I wouldn't like one. What do you mean?
No, I mean, I don't like it, all these girls.
And he yummed. Not the sophisticated view.
So there you go. I'm glad Uncle Milty left him be himself.
Yeah, he
And
did.
he really did. And Elvis, you could tell Elvis was having fun with him.
Exactly. And this was only about 6 months after his airing on the Dorsey Brothers show, because he aired with Milton in June 5th of 1956.
Right.
And so it was only like 6 months later.
And he only did a few songs on Milton Berle's show, but the one that really caused all the craziness was, of course, the Hound Dog performance.
The burlesque scene at the end where he really gets it.
Yeah, and nobody knew in the band that he was going to do that. I don't even think Elvis knew. I think he just felt it at the moment and just broke it down at the very end.
Exactly.
Everybody, I'm sure, listening has seen that scene,
Oh,
where
yeah.
he does it and just kind of... I remember all the lines came out in the newspapers the next day. They never seen a man make love to a microphone before, and all
Yeah.
kind of stuff like that was coming out.
Elvis Presley is a no talent. He's vulgar. He's a sex maniac.
Yeah.
So then a month goes by,
Mhm.
and Steve Allen gets him.
Right.
Now, Steve Allen, everybody, did not like rock and roll. He hated rock and roll.
Yeah, he didn't like
and
it at all.
he didn't really want Elvis on his show, but Elvis
Nope.
was the hot gossip, thing that was going around, and he just couldn't pass it up.
He did not like rock and roll. And I know going in, he did not want to like Elvis. He did not want to like him at all.
Exactly.
None of them did, except I
The
know-
Dorsey brothers, I think, liked him.
and Milton.
Oh, yeah.
But Ed
Yeah.
and Steve, they
No.
did not want to like him. But after Steve met him and worked with him, he learned he was actually a polite guy, and he called him Mr. Allen and thanked him and this and that. It was very
Right.
nice to him, and whether he liked rock and roll or not, he learned to like Elvis.
Yeah. You know what I think's funny is when you watch it on TV, you can see how uncomfortable Elvis
Yeah.
is and how he's not happy. They have him dressed up in a tuxedo. They have him singing to a dog. I mean, you could just see it all over his face. And
Right.
then when he does that number, I want you, I need you, I love you, and Steve says, what are you going to sing? He's like, I want you, I need you, I love you.
He kind of mumbles it,
Yeah,
puts his head down.
like
yeah.
I just got to get this over with.
Right.
So let's take a little peek into after Steve Allen's show was done.
It was the next day, I
It was
think.
the next day, and let's hear what the Elvis fans had to say about it.
What has been your own personal reaction to the reaction of your fans as a result of the Steve Allen appearance?
Well, the kids didn't like it, In other words, they were writing letters in and telling them to leave me alone, leave me the way I was, and all that. But I believe that I won a lot of new friends, by doing that, by showing them that I could act like a gentleman if I wanted to, which is not the way that I started out.
Sure.
Elvis the Optimist.
I love it how he says, I could act like a gentleman if I wanted to. That's
tried.
so funny.
He tried to make a positive out of it. Well, I made some new fans. Everybody's grandmother liked me better.
Yeah. Well, what's funny now he is on the minds and the lips of everybody in the nation, whether
Right.
you hate him or you love him, whatever, he's being talked about. And like Milton Berle said, he got nothing but fan mail, not fan mail, but, I
Yeah.
think he got both actually, but
Yeah.
he got like equal amounts of hate mail as he did We Love Him mail. And he actually called up Colonel Tom Parker and said, you got a hit.
Right.
You got this many people in the world watching him, whether they hate him or love him, and they're writing in one way or the other. You've got a star.
Yeah, exactly.
So now, suddenly, Sullivan is interested.
Right. Now, you've got a great story behind that, and you got to tell it. You told it on the show, but you got to tell it here.
I love it
It's
because
hilarious.
it's so funny.
Yeah, it's great.
And it's so Parker.
Mm-hmm.
So back in the very beginning, with the Dorsey show and Steve Allen and Milton and everything, of course, Parker had, sent out invitations to everybody, and Sullivan got one. And back then, he was letting everyone air Elvis for $5,000.
Mm-hmm.
And he offered that to Sullivan too, who quickly turned him down and said, "Heck no, I am not doing this.
Right.
This is never. Your boy's never going to be on my show."
Mm-hmm.
Well, then of course he gets knocked off the top ratings because he's not airing him, and everybody else is. So he's like, "Oh my gosh, he's going to have to eat crow."
Mm-hmm.
So he comes back to Colonel Parker and he says, "Okay, give me your boy." And he says, "Well, that's fine, but now it's $50,000."
Right.
He paid 10 times what he could have paid.
That is so Parker, like you
Yeah,
said.
oh, absolutely, so Parker.
And I'm sure
yeah.
Elvis got a big kick out of that, too, because that money went in his pocket. So
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. Well, who knows how much went in Elvis's and how much went in Parker's, because, he was taking a good chunk of everything.
Right.
So,
But, look at how much stuff happened to Elvis in that short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
From between Dorsey Brothers and Sullivan, he made his first movie, Love Me Tender.
right.
His concerts were like selling out everywhere. He just became the biggest thing in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm sure he made a lot of people nervous. The bigwigs, the guys who were there before him, the Sinatras and the Dinos.
Oh,
and
they're
those guys,
watching.
And the Perry Comos.
And Sinatra didn't like him. He
Right.
had nothing good to say about him.
Mm-mm.
Bing Crosby
Yeah.
had nothing good to say about him.
Yeah.
However, and Elvis's death in 1977, they all had all these great things to
Yeah.
say. They were all still alive.
Because they got to know him through the years and realized, hey, this guy's good.
And
He's
then
okay.
and not just that they realized that he's an okay guy, but then his career had manifested into something so much bigger than what he started out to be.
Right.
And then they were like, wow, he's in everything. He's in gospel, he's in country,
Yeah.
he's in rhythm and blues.
You-
He's not just this kid
Right.
annoying us.
And a real scary thing for those guys, too, because, we always talk about the Elvis before the Army and the Elvis after.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that voice, when he came out, when he released Are You Lonesome Tonight, and you could hear his notes and his softness in his voice, and he was a singer suddenly. So I
Right.
bet they were really shaking in their boots at that point.
They're like, oh
you
my
know.
gosh, this brat can sing. What
Mhm.
happened?
Right.
What happened to Tutti Frutti? And now he's singing Fame
Yeah.
and Fortune. He can hit notes that they're envying.
This
So-
ain't blue suede shoes, I tell you.
Yeah, exactly. So he goes to Sullivan, and, he was a hit there. He
Right.
did all his great hits. He did Don't Be Cruel.
One of the last appearances on Sullivan. I love it because, once again, just like Steve Allen had to do, he had to kind of humble himself and have Elvis on it, and he ended up liking him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when Elvis did Peace in the Valley at the very
That's
end,
my favorite part of the Sullivan.
Ed kind of had to show a different side and kind
And
of.
they didn't want him to do Peace in the
No,
Valley. And
no.
this is where Elvis starts to flex his star muscles. Because nobody wanted him to do
Right.
a gospel song on prime TV music.
Yeah, they wanted
you
Money
know.
Honey. And
But he's like, nope, I told my mama that I was going to do this song. And,
Right.
and you want me to be here? This is what we're going to do.
And I like how Ed kind of explains it. He felt like this would kind of put you in the mood.
yeah.
He's kind of
No,
explaining
Hungarian relief.
it. Yeah, yeah.
This young boy, has a real concern about the Hungarian situation and the Hungarian relief, and he feels like this will kind of put you in the mood. He wants
Right.
to sing Peace in the Valley. I'm like, what?
I'm sure that was the first time ever on Sullivan to have something like that. I don't know.
I still have to go Google Hungarian relief 1956. I don't even know what was going on at that time. It must have
Right.
been some, catastrophic
Right.
event, like we're always having in the world.
But the cool part is at the end of the song, they said when Ed walked back out and talked to you after your performance, that meant you were in, that he liked you. And
Yeah,
he didn't do that with
exactly.
a whole lot of people.
Exactly.
Or a
yeah.
lot of artists.
Uh-huh.
But when Elvis finished that, Ed did walk out, put his arm around him,
Come
and shook
back
his
out.
hand.
Yeah, called him back out. This is a good, fine, decent boy. Yeah, that was like the best.
And that's like the king of television giving you the okay. So that was a
Right.
good thing.
Right.
The man saying, this guy's all right. For the world to see that was pretty good stuff.
And that had to have made Elvis feel wonderful
Yeah.
because he'd been picked apart at this point, called everything,
Yeah.
Elvis the pelvis, rude, lewd,
Mhm.
just making fun of his mama even. Like,
Right.
did your mama raise you? Who raised you?
And he always said he
You
never
know.
tried to do anything to offend God or his mother. He just, Elvis was basically a lot of emotion just coming out in your body,
Well, and Elvis wasn't your typical white America.
No, he wasn't.
He grew up in black America. He grew up in the ghetto, in Tupelo, black friends and black neighbors, black churches.
And he loved
black
that kind of music to begin
and
with.
And so that culture had a completely different way of expressing music,
Right.
and Elvis absorbed all that. He didn't think, he'd been seeing it his whole life, even in church. He didn't think it was nasty.
No.
It was just a way to express yourself.
Right. Well, I think in time people eventually caught on and realized, he was okay.
Well, the government, however,
Right.
I think he
yeah.
was scaring the heck out of Uncle Sam. And we're going to talk about that.
That's what happens when you're a big star and you're a threat to the world
There,
because you're
you
nasty
scared-
and evil and mean
yeah.
and bad. Uncle
You
Sam.
scare the government, man. They're like, how can we make this boy go away?
Right.
And the draft was still in effect,
Yeah.
but they just hadn't shut it off. There was like no reason for it.
Right.
It just happened to still be going at the time, or else they could have never done this.
Right.
And they just, very conveniently, Elvis Presley's number popped up.
Right. Mm-hmm. And he was at the height of his career too.
Yep.
Right now, he was filming King Creole. He was had his hair all dyed black, and he's just the biggest star in the world now.
Living the high life.
Movie star, rock and roll star. He's just doing it
Starlet
all.
girlfriends.
Yeah. And
Brand new house.
Yeah,
Bought his mom a new house, his daddy mom a new car. He was living a life he'd only dreamed of, and he thought it was going to come to an end.
Yeah.
And so did the government. The government thought this would be it.
But he didn't try to fight it. He went in and did what he was supposed to do and served his time and did it well.
Yeah.
Got a few honors when he was in there for sharpshooting and all kind of stuff.
Right. Came out as sergeant.
But you and I often talk about this, and we mentioned it earlier, that he went in there, that rock and roll rebel star. But in the Army, he met Charlie Hodge and a few folks who became known as the
lot of
Memphis
friends,
Mafia.
actually, yeah.
But Charlie was the one who talked the music a lot with him, right?
Right.
And
Charlie
they,
was the big one, I think, the big connection that came out of the Army.
because he was an entertainer himself. He was a musician.
Correct.
And I don't know if Elvis recognized that talent that he had in his voice he didn't know he had yet, or maybe it was Charlie.
No, I actually think Charlie did.
Right.
And if you read some of Charlie's books, he talks about that time period. And he said that, basically he told Elvis that your vocals, it's a muscle.
Right.
And you have to train it and you have to work. And Elvis is like, well, I'm going to use these 2 years to my advantage.
Right.
And they did. Charlie said that he was at the piano every day and doing vocal work. And I think he also had a vocal instructor that had come over to in Germany and helped him with that as well. So he used his time wisely.
Right. And I'm sure the Elvis of Money Honey and Blue Suede Shoes could never have done It's Now or Never.
Not in the
At that
beginning.
point, no.
Not in the beginning. He could do like real high falsetto.
Yeah.
My Happiness, high falsetto things. He had such a wide range.
I wonder what Elvis thought when he realized he could do it. Like, wow,
don't know.
I can really sing.
Well, he's a big fan of Mario Lanza opera.
Yeah.
So that's why Elvis loved the big songs like Hurt and
Right.
all the things he did later in his life with the really big orchestra. He
Yeah.
really had a very eccentric taste in music.
So he's in the Army and he learns to sing even better. He's got that voice down.
Right.
So when he's getting ready to get out of the Army, he's a little bit confused. He don't know what he's going to do because they
No.
ain't even ask him. When he's in there right before discharge, what are you going to do? Well, I don't know yet. And then I think the offer came in. The Parker set up with
I think a lot of people wanted to capture him just as he was coming out, and
Yeah.
it just so happened that Frank Sinatra got to him.
right.
Either the money was right or he was the first offer. I'm not sure which,
Right.
but definitely everything fell into place.
So once again, another person who deplored rock and roll,
Yep.
who did not like Elvis Presley. Well, now you got to do a show hosting him, welcoming him home. So,
Exactly.
Frank, I'm sure that was kind of tough for him to do.
I
would
think maybe by that time he might have been realizing, that things were a little bit different than he thought.
Right.
Well, let's hear for a really quick moment. Let's listen to what Frank Jr. and Nancy had to say about it.
He melted my heart to meet him in person.
Elvis, right in the thick of his up-and-coming fame, was put into the Army. And he came back from the Army, and that was the Welcome Back show. I believe, if my memory serves me correct, that's about 1960. And Elvis was still young, tall, good-looking kid and everything. And it was a great coup for a television production firm to put the heartthrob of the new generation and the heartthrob of the current generation on television together.
It turned out to be a very, very cute moment in history, I think, with the two of them singing.
Oh, she's so right. It
really
really
was.
was.
But the world did get to see the new Elvis. That was a perfect opening because he sang one of my favorite Elvis ballads and pretty songs is Fame and Fortune.
Oh, it's the most beautiful song.
Yeah, and that is so different from even in the love songs of the 50s. It was a lot different. That Velvet, we talk about the Velvet Elvis. That was Velvet Elvis.
Oh yeah,
at his finest.
he was coming into his own.
Yeah.
The taping actually took place March 12th, 1960, and it aired May 12th, 1960. And it had an estimated 67.7% of the overall television audience. The competition, this was I found very interesting. NBC on that same night aired Tennessee Ernie Ford's show, and his guest was Johnny Cash and Groucho Marx.
Wow, you got all those three legends together, and Elvis and Frank.
And they only managed to pull 21.1% of the
Wow.
audience. Yeah.
Sorry, fellas.
You just can't beat Elvis. Well, and it wasn't just Frank and Elvis. I mean, he had Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, Nancy was on there. I mean, he had a big lineup. If Frank and Elvis wasn't enough, geez, you know, Sammy Davis, everybody loved him.
Yeah, and Elvis did introduce another rock and roll song. He did Stuck on You on there, but even Stuck on You was a lot different than Hound Dog or Jailhouse Rock. It was a different sound, a different feel. But music was changing at that time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Elvis, you know, was always ahead of the game. And he already started doing these songs, and he was ready for it. And the changes worked well for Elvis. Of course, that whole special was built up to that end where Frank and Elvis are together.
Man, that's nice.
Yeah. And what's funny, too, is you said on the show, you could share again, that the crowd, the audience was kind of set up a little bit.
Yeah, they the studio made sure to go out and get a mix of fans. They didn't want one, like all Sinatra fans, so nobody would clap for Elvis and vice versa. So it was like even. There were Elvis fans and Frank Sinatra fans.
But the one difference is the Elvis fans are a lot louder.
Well, they're young.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about 16, 17-year-old girls. They're screaming versus, you know, the older ladies.
Frank handled it well, and there's even a joke Joey Bishop makes.
Oh, yeah.
2 or 3, Joey kind of little slaps in there because they insulted one another.
Yeah.
But Frank even sets himself up like, I wonder what would have happened if I'd recorded Love Me Tender instead of you, Elvis. And then Joey right away says, oh, it would have sold much less.
Yeah, a couple
much
million
less.
copies less, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah, he says, or something like that.
And then Joey even says, I never heard so many girls screaming for a singer before.
Yeah, and he goes, did you forget about me?
Yeah. So Frank did have a good sense of humor about it. So that's a good thing.
So here's an example. Here's 2 quotes I'm going to read of what Frank Sinatra thought of Elvis in 1957 and what he thought of Elvis in 1977. So in 57, Frank said, his kind of music is deplorable, a rancid smelling aphrodisiac. It fosters almost totally negative and destructive reactions in young people.
Wow.
That's what he said. In 77, this is what Frank said. There have been many accolades uttered about Elvis's talent and performances through the years, all of which I agree with wholeheartedly. I shall miss him dearly as a friend. He was a warm, considerate, and generous man.
There you go.
Wow. Talk about black and white. Now, I don't believe that was said just because Elvis was dead.
No.
I think he had just had several years to realize. Because even when Elvis goes back on stage and they shoot the international scenes, Frank's in the audience.
Yeah, they got to know each other well through the years.
With his daughter and
and Frank,
everybody else.
Elvis actually worked with Frank's, I don't know, was his girlfriend or wife at the time, Julia Prowse.
Yeah, he did some with GI Blues.
Frank would go on the set and talk. They'd sit and talk for long periods of time.
In fact, Elvis was scared to death of Frank when they were recording that because Elvis liked to go in to his trailer with his ladies. And of course, sometimes there were things that went on and sometimes there weren't. But whatever they were doing in there, he was afraid when Frank would come on the set that they would be caught.
Right.
So he had the guys always banging if they were in there that Frank was on the set so they could come out and he wouldn't get in trouble. He was probably afraid of Frank's mob connections.
Right.
He'd have him buried somewhere in the Las Vegas desert, never to be seen again, you know.
Yeah. But all the guys we've talked about so far, you know, like we said, Frank Sinatra, Steve Allen, and Ed Sullivan, none of them wanted to like Elvis. They didn't like rock and roll. They didn't like Elvis Presley. But after meeting him, working with him, none of them said a bad thing about him after that. They all realized he's a good dude.
That's right. Well, listen, folks, we've been talking a lot about Elvis's early TV years. We hope you enjoy the show. And if you have any comments you'd like to make about this podcast, shoot us an email or make a comment in the comment section. We love you guys.
Thanks for watching.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
And hit that notification bell.
We are your Blue Suede Connection.